Okay, this is the video we threatened you with, and you went ahead and did something bad, so here it is. Here's your punishment.
Yeah, okay, now they switched.
Mark Tommerdahl and Bob Dennis, and we're here to talk about data.
Yeah, but we didn't point out something. Did anyone in the last video notice anything different?
You might notice that we upgraded the firmware on our multimedia command and control center with larger fonts.
Wait, did the glue run out on the old one? Yeah,
I think I pulled it off and then stepped on it, and there was a shoe print on it or something like that. So I recycled it.
Even by our standards, it was.
Even by our standards, it was starting to look a little bit
looking too low.
ratty. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we were going to talk about self-perception, and self-perception is sort of maybe the art of deceiving yourself. You know, and
I don't do that.
Yeah. You know, you might just there's a lot of ways that this happens and creeps up on you, and you basically you go along 5, 10, 15 years and you say, oh yeah, I'm still in pretty good shape. I trained really hard for 50 years, and then you get on a scale and you go, oh, oops. I might have gained a little bit of weight there. So one thing, and the reason we're bringing this up is because we had somebody ask a question: should they use the brain gauge to measure changes that they were trying to invoke with different methods? They were using hyperbaric chamber, or some kind of neuromodulatory system, or neurofeedback, or pulse electromagnetic field coils on their head, and they were like, well, don't I just feel better? And won't I just feel better? I'll just be able to get through everyday function. But you know, we mentioned the boiling frog syndrome.
Yeah.
And you stick a frog in a pot of water, and it's all true. It's on the internet, so it must be true.
It must be. How could they put anything on the internet that's not true?
Yeah.
I mean, it's digital.
I mean, after all,
not only is it true, it's like high def true.
We put videos on the internet that everything we say is true. So
1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
For very large values of 1. Any physicist will tell you that.
Wow.
Did you know that?
No.
That was the joke. Actually, when I was in grad school, 2 × 2 = 5 for large values of 2. It's kind of a physics sciencey kind of thing if you get it.
Sounds like a nerd joke.
It's a nerd joke. Okay, guilty as charged. So Mark is extending this topic that I find very interesting, which is how can you know if something is changing in your health? And a lot of that has to do with perceptions, right? That it starts with that, and then people go in and they go to their doctor and they get a measurement. But the problem with brain health is that it's your brain that's doing the perceiving.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem, right? So if something's altering the way your brain functions, then it's kind of altering the one tool that you have natively available. So it's really not a very reliable way to tell that you're thinking. Okay, ask a crazy person if they're crazy sometimes. You know,
they'll say absolutely not.
What are you talking about? You're crazy. I'm not crazy. Right? Because they don't perceive that there's anything wrong with them, because there is something wrong with the brain.
People have actually done studies on this epidemiological level, where they look at different populations, and they look at populations with very good lifestyles and very poor lifestyles. And the people with very poor lifestyles who have a higher morbidity, or they die sooner, shorter lifespan, they actually don't perceive that they're not as healthy as everyone around them. But the people in the healthier population, they notice, and they basically, scientifically put, they complain more.
That's they're complainers.
Yeah.
So well, this is kind of generally true. I mean, I think it's true. The more intelligent that a person is, the more they realize they don't know.
Exactly.
You know, it's kind of like that, you know?
Yeah.
And the less tuned in a person is to how they really are feeling, how they're performing, the more they're like, yeah, I'm just fine, you know, whatever, pass me a cigarette kind of thing. And, you know, that's fine if that's all you need. If you just need it, you know, I feel good enough, I can go through another day. But what we're saying is, well, if you take your brain seriously, and you want to know how your brain is functioning, you actually have to measure it. It's like blood pressure, it's like weight, height, a lot of things about your body. If you really want to know, your vision. I thought I had perfectly fine vision until someone actually corrected it for me. I had no idea. Did you know this? until I had my vision corrected, I had no idea that stars were individual points. I always thought they were fuzzy dots.
Wow, I didn't know that.
There you go. And until I got my vision corrected, it was like, whoa, I had no idea, you know. And then the thing is, I think perception is generally like that. I mean, you know, right? You get used to something.
You're always used to something, and how you feel one day is not that different from how you feel from the day before. But how do you feel?
Boiling frog
How do you
syndrome.
compare today with how you felt 10 years before?
Right.
Or perceived, rather.
Slow trend. Right?
Slow trend. And
Slow
so what a lot of
trend.
people don't realize is that in the literature, a lot of people predict or very strongly believe that you should be able to detect Alzheimer's, the beginning of Alzheimer's, 10 to 15 years before it actually starts. And every once in a while you hear somebody make a big splash about how they've come up with the latest and greatest imaging device to detect plaques from Alzheimer's. Well, if the plaques are there, it's probably a little bit late. You might have, it might be too late. That might be 6 months before you die. You certainly want to catch it up. But this is also an example of how some studies are going to get corrupted, because say you start doing a study to track people and say, well, it looks like somebody's brain health is falling off 15 to 10 years before they would get and die from Alzheimer's, then there might be an intervention.
Well, this brings up an ethics question, right? Say you're doing a study and you can detect whether or not a person's going to have a heart attack. And you know, the little red light goes on in your instrument saying this person's going to have a heart attack. Do you tell them so that they can do something about it, or do you just let the study go on? I'm pretty sure I know what Professor Know-It-All would say. Let me ask him. let me ask Professor Know-It-All. You must allow the study to continue regardless of the health and welfare of the subject. There you go. That's one opinion. On the other hand, you know, and some studies, they don't give you any feedback at all because they want to make it as clean and pure as they can. I think that's unethical.
Oh yeah, probably so.
Just, you know, I mean, if I was sick and somebody was
yeah.
watching me, I would never sign up for something like that where they're like, "No, just keep going, man. Just keep, you know, waiting for me to drop dead or something."
And not that we've had any experience with any bureaucrats or administrators tell us how to run a study.
The irony is the people who are supposed to protect your safety are the ones who are
they're like, no, you're not
to
allowed to give your opinions. Well, actually, you're allowed to give opinions, but you're not allowed to give medical advice.
That's right. So we don't give medical advice.
Every once in a while, people ask opinions, and then
happy to give them.
Happy to give it to them.
So here's the issue, right? Say we're doing a study with a brain gauge, and say hypothetically the brain gauge could tell you there was something wrong, and that there was going to be something, that it was getting progressively worse over time, and that maybe in 10 or 15 years you would develop dementia.
Yeah.
Now, what would you do? I think a regular person would start using that brain gauge and saying, okay, let me try yoga. Did that help? Not really. Let me try staying away from certain types of foods.
Or certain types of people.
Right? Or certain types of people.
Stay away from grumpy people.
Stop drinking alcohol. Stop watching Grumpy Scientists because these guys really get me angry, right? Just change your lifestyle. And you keep using the brain gauge and you go back to it and you go, wow, okay, you know, maybe there is something to that. So can you actually
see some of this in data?
Can you see some of this in data? And that's what we're here for today.
Actually, we're going to show some data.
So here comes a data slide, and that means we have to stop recording right now. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, ready? Your head's going to get really small. Hold on. Whoa, here we are, slide one.
Oh, we started again. Okay.
Yeah, we started again.
So
I always do that to him because it's hilarious. Try to catch him off guard.
Okay, so let me give you a little background on the study. This was done down in Melbourne, where they were normally what they do. These people are all involved in sports, and they got concussions. Well, the controls didn't get concussions, but these people were tracked quite extensively. But all these people were cleared after their concussion 3 to 5 days after they had the concussion. They used their regular, basically, we won't mention names, but it was an online cognitive assessment tool that apparently is very similar to what people use in the States widely, but it cleared people right away.
By cleared, it means what they mean is, oh, you're good to go. You're healthy again. Go ahead and start playing again. So you're medically cleared.
Medically cleared
to play again, or whatever it was you were doing, defusing bombs, going over waterfalls in a barrel, whatever it was you were doing.
Yeah, something like that.
You know,
some kind of sport. They keep,
some kind of sport.
You know, and I never quite understand the language. They say, well, no, Australian rules football. I'm like, well, I don't know what that is. But, you know, different rules, no helmets, whatever. I don't know. But anyway, boy, we sound ignorant, don't we? Or
Yep. There's no hiding that.
Yeah, all we care about is they got hit in the head, so we can get their data.
Or something happened. Maybe the toilet was swirling around the wrong way in Australia.
Now,
they got dizzy and they fell over.
Now, the average date that this data was collected was 16 months post-concussion.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you're saying a year and 4 months after the concussion, they're collecting data.
We're collecting data. Some of the people, and the difference between, there's 3 groups of data that we're showing here. And for those of you that have a brain gauge and are sort of used to the analytical package, we show the bar chart here that shows you know, the different measures that you get from the brain gauge, and you see the controls on the left. Post-concussion, and it says not fatigued. Well, not fatigued, that means that's the people that did not have the symptom of concussion or symptom of fatigue 16 months after their concussion. Now, the post-concussion fatigue group, they did have this one symptom where, yeah, I'm fine, but I feel a little fatigued.
Now, both of these groups had been cleared, right?
Oh, yeah.
Long time
Still
ago.
walking around. And
walking around, you're totally good, you know, walk the rest of it off.
Yeah,
There's nothing to it. You're just a little tired because you're working too hard.
The fatigue one was like, yeah, we're still tired, but yeah, my brain's still fine. You know, I'm still good to go. And that's actually the way a lot of people, they'll say, I've got a headache, I still think, but you know, it's just concussion symptoms. How does that affect my brain function? Well, let's look at the data. For those of you that, just to recall, green is good, full bar is good. Where the bar is 100%, that means that's up to full normative values. Now, post-concussion, not fatigue, they all look pretty good. Post-concussion, the fatigue group looks pretty bad.
Yeah, that's bad.
Okay, red is bad, yellow's still not good, and short bars are really not good. So clearly they didn't. Their speed is below normal. Their fatigue score is well below normal. Their focus is below normal. TOJ, timing perception, those are all abnormal. And just you can actually look at how's the cortical metric, which is the overall average. How does that compare to the others two? Well, they're still not doing too well. So
this is a long time after their concussion event. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, on average, 16 months.
Yeah.
So these people had been cleared. They might have played a whole nother season, 2 seasons. You know, with this kind of an injury, they're limping around. Maybe they feel things aren't quite right. Maybe they don't.
Yeah, exactly. So they're still what's called symptomatic, semi-symptomatic.
Semi-symptomatic, but not so much so that there would be a medical concern. They're good to play.
Now,
by the standard cognitive assessment tool.
Now, they're also another part of the study was that another outcome measure was measured. That means besides the brain gauge, used TMS and EEG to get a paired pulse response, and the people that there was a significant difference, which lined up pretty well with the brain gauge scores. Right. The neurophysiological measure that they were using with TMS was a bit more expensive and a bit more difficult to use, but the brain gauge scores looked a little more sensitive, actually.
Well, this is the thing, and so the idea here is to put in your hands the tools that you need to go ahead and make an assessment for yourself. You can talk to your doctor about it if you want, if they want to educate themselves. And you can show them some numbers, right? Like when I go in to talk to my doctor about blood pressure or whatever, I bring in a bunch of measurements that I took. So I guess the point here is, following on from our previous video, that you can't really tell. Maybe you feel a little bit symptomatic, but you can't really tell if you have really minor, okay, you know, you're okay, or whether you have some fairly significant, cortical functional deficits, unless you measure it. And that's the point of this data that our movie is going to be beneath, so we're up above here, up above us. That's the point of the data, is that you actually can measure these things, and then you can continue treatment of whatever it is you choose to do, and make sure that treatment is helping you, and make sure that you're okay before you go back in, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the number one way to get really hurt by head injury is to get a head injury while you already have one.
Right. So
right?
if you're symptomatic, still symptomatic,
yeah, no,
and you get out. That's probably not a good thing.
You need to be not doing whatever it was you were doing. You know, you just need to let yourself get better, whether that takes time or some other intervention, whatever. And so this kind of leads us into the next couple of slides that I sort of wanted to show, if we have another minute or two here.
Yeah, this is
something that's been studied. Okay, can people, when you do something that alters a person's brain function, can they tell? And you might remember the story of me talking about my friend from high school who thought drinking beer made him stronger. His perception was that he was stronger, you know, the sort of berserker. Oh, but he got weaker. You know, case of beer, did some weightlifting, and of course he got weaker and weaker, right? So we're going to show a little bit of data, but this has been studied. And the question here is, can people perceive changes in their performance when you do something to alter their perception? And the answer is sometimes not so well. So
yeah, when he says studied, he means by real researchers,
by actual scientists, not like some high school kid with a case of beer and a bad attitude, right? Okay, ready for the next slide, Mark?
Yep.
Slide number 3 here. Well,
psychoactive drugs.
Journal of Psychoactive Drugs. So there's a research journal called the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs. This is one topically on practically everything. And this one studies the effects of psychoactive drugs. It's a real journal. This is the one that I own. This is, you know, my personal copy that I had to buy one of these when I was in grad school, because we were studying things in abnormal psychology.
That must have been before you get everything online.
Yeah, that's back in the day when we used to put stuff on paper. Right? It's a strange substance. If you've never seen it, it's thin, you can write on it. It's sort of like papyrus. So the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs is a scholarly journal in which they were studying the effects of psychoactive substances on people. And on this particular journal, you can see on the cover they have something called a Kachina doll, which is like a Native American doll that some people just keep as artwork. So, but it's important because that was actually used in their study at the end, at the last paper in this particular volume of the journal, studied the effects of LSD on creativity. So we're going to go ahead and look at that. Now, if you keep in mind that Kachina doll, and imagine that the experiment is people drawing the doll, people who are artistic, drawing the doll, done, then they drop acid. Changes their perceptions, changes how well they embrace, you know, the universe and all that stuff. All of them thought they got much more creative and insightful. Then they draw the doll again. Right, and I've mentioned this one a couple times because I find it interesting. This is one of the many cases where people have studied the effects of mind-altering substances on perception, and where you might think that your performance goes way up, but it goes way down. So, are you ready for the next slide?
You betcha.
And here it is, as promised. So this is a copy of one of the drawings. They actually, over several months, they collected 255 drawings. So we will group them into 2 groups. The straight group, which is a person drawing the doll as it sat in front of them. And then the stoned group, which is 1 hour after a person dropped acid. It's dosed and everything was controlled. It was a scientific study published in peer review. It must be right. or maybe not. But anyway, it passed peer review. And
I can't see a difference.
Yeah, exactly. So what the people, this is apparently pretty typical, and there was a bunch of other things done, and people have done this with pottery and painting and stuff like that. But this is an example. Now, the person who drew it when they were straight, thought when they had dropped acid, they were much more in tune with things. They were much more sort of able to think in the abstract in multiple dimensions and blah, blah, blah. And when they went ahead and did this before and after comparison, you know, they had tenured professor art critics go through and analyze, you know, all of the Western influences on art and the, you know, representational and non-representational and blah, 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 blah. But it seems to me like this is a pretty straightforward comparison, right? If you think that the stoned version of this is much more somehow deep and creative, That's fine. It's a subjective thing. But I would say that the person who did the drawing or the painting when they were stoned was cognitively impaired.
Now, it doesn't mean that if you try to draw the Kachina doll and it comes out looking like the one on the right, that you're stoned.
Doesn't mean that. No. It means we're comparing same person 1 hour apart.
These are people that could actually draw. It's not like somebody like me. If I drew it,
creative
it would look pretty
people
bad.
who were willing to drop acid and clearly had done so before. So maybe there's not permanent damage, but you can see there's a huge difference. And so the thing is that I would like to bring forward is that every one of these people, of the 250 some odd samples they took, thought they had done, I think it's 250, but you can look it up. It was a lot. They thought they were much more creative, and what they drew when they were stoned was much, much better. Their perception of their skill, their insight, their artistic, capability was that it was much better. When in fact, by I think any standard, it was significantly worse.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know if people like a follow-up, well, maybe not a follow-up study, but a study on people that are chronic users of LSD.
Well, this is the
thing. See if they actually do have that perception of being more creative all the time. It sort of segues into a study that I'm familiar with, where people that use THC or marijuana, chronic heavy users of THC, and this actually plugs into one of the brain gauge scores, but they actually think that their reaction time is just as good, if not better, than everyone else's, but they're actually worse.
Yeah, so people who are chronic marijuana users, smokers, whatever, think that their performance is better, but it's measurably worse. And so I guess our point here, once again, is that if you actually want to know how your cortex, how your brain is performing, you have to measure it directly, and simply going on the basis of the perception of it can be very misleading. And this is the sort of the caution that we would have with nootropics or anything else that you're doing. If you're neurohacking, you're biohacking, you're self-hacking,
putting a lot of butter in your coffee,
putting a lot of something like that, exactly. And you're trying to enhance your brain performance. Whether you feel better, that's totally cool. I mean, if you feel better about it, and your self-confidence is better, I mean, that's great.
No,
but the question is,
feel better.
Right? It doesn't make them drive better or anything like that, or operate heavy machinery any better. But the question is, if you're serious about wanting to know, is this thing that I'm doing in my lifestyle making my brain performance better? Or if you want to know, is it maintaining my cognitive performance over time as I age, or as I work my way through some illness or some other sort of life stressor or something? I think the answer is you have to measure it. Otherwise, there's no way for you to know.
Nope.
Right? So I think that's
probably enough for this one.
I think that's enough for this
one.
one.
Probably lost at least one drug-using viewer, but that's sorry about that, buddy.
We're not laying down judgment here. We're just telling you, if you want to know the value of something, you got to measure it. If you don't measure it, you can take a guess, but you won't really know. All right. Thanks for joining us.
All right.